So my name is Meaghan, and I currently work at the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. So how I'm going to break down my story, this helps me with my organization as well, is I'm going to first talk about kind of like my general story, how I got to where I am, the stigmas that I faced while going through all my mental health challenges, and then finally I'm going to talk about where I'm at now. So I've always been a really anxious person. From the time that I was little, I was so scared of literally everything. Like if I heard an ambulance, I was terrified of dogs. I was just scared of everything. And I never really understood why, and I really just thought that was who I was. I never really understood that I was actually going through a lot of anxiety. This went on throughout my life. I had various coping skills. But I still was just always on edge. Fast forward, when I got to high school, a really traumatic event happened to me where my cousin, who was a couple years older than me, collapsed at his school after football practice and died. So that kind of was a huge trigger for me, because I was like, if they didn't know that he had an enlarged heart, why don't they know about me? So I was a freshman in high school. I had this idea of wanting to be perfect. That was always my way of coping with things, was being a perfectionist. So I was, in ASB, and I was running for all these classes and programs and all these sports. And when that happened to me, I just totally went recluse, and I started getting panic attacks, and that was really scary for me. I honest to God thought I was gonna die. I fainted in a class, and my mom was like, we need to work on this. So she got me to go into grief counseling, which is actually the best thing that ever happened to me. I was kind of resistant at first, which most high schoolers are. They don't want to admit that there's something wrong with them. And I had to leave school early once a week to make it to my appointment because it was far away. And I would lie and tell people that I was I was like, oh, my mom's just letting me leave early or whatever. And that was kind of a stigma that I faced because I didn't want other people to know that I was, going through these traumas, because I was supposed to be perfect. So that took up a lot of my time, and then on top of that, I wasn't able to make it through school all the way. So for a huge chunk of my freshman year, I couldn't make it through a full day of school, not even a week of school, without having panic, without being able to sleep, without being able to not just hyper focus on me dying. So I made my mom take me to all of these specialists. I told all of these specialists that they were liars. So I told the neurologist he was a liar, told the endocrinologist that he was a liar, and I was like, there's something wrong with me. You guys didn't find it in my cousin, so you're not finding it in me either, and I'm gonna die. And so I had to work through that with my therapist. It took a while, and I ended up getting a psychiatrist, and I had to get medication. And so they diagnosed me generalized anxiety disorder, and it was really hard for me to say that oh my God, I'm taking medicine. So throughout high school, I was on and off the medication because when I felt better, I was like, oh, I don't need to take this anymore, because I didn't understand that it wasn't just a cure-all. When you take medicine, it's not just like antibiotics. So that was really hard for me, and so you could see me going up and down. So on the face level, I look completely fine. No one really knew I was struggling with anxiety because I wouldn't tell them. I was too embarrassed, but my mom knew, and my family knew. So that was really hard on them. And while all this was going on, I was having a bunch of family drama too. My parents were separated. My dad was in and out of my life, and that was really hard for me. And my mom's trying to do her best, raising two kids that are both teenagers is really difficult. So my brother and I were going through our own things because my brother also has mental health challenges, and his are a little bit more severe than mine. So we were both trying to cope with, the loss of like not having our dad around all the time, our mom like stressing out and doing her best to provide for us. So that was also going on in the background, all while I was trying to be like this perfect student, this perfect person. So I started going, like I said, to the psychiatrist, and I was on the medicine that I'm still currently on, and for me that's the best way for me to handle my anxiety. I know that's totally not how everybody else works, but for me, I take my anti-anxiety medication on top of doing other various coping skills. So while I was at my psychiatrist, he also decided to diagnose me with OCD. And I was like, oh great, another label, that's awesome. So I also got diagnosed with that. And I, when I was in high school, thought, oh my God, I'm one of those people on those TV shows. And I was like, but I don't exhibit any of those types of things. And so it was kind of hard for me because they didn't explain it to me. My psychiatrist just told me like, you have this. And I was like, okay. So I got a grip on my anxiety when I was about maybe my senior year of high school. I finally came to terms with it and decided that this was going to have to be a lifelong thing for me to work on, and that it doesn't have to define me. But when I went to college, I had I was in a really long relationship, and that was hard on me too. And so, I was changing up my medicines finally for like the first time. And I finally realized that the medication that I was on wasn't the greatest. So once I finally found my right medication, it took years. I started doing really well. And really well for me was not feeling foggy in my head. Because I always had good grades. I always had, I could perform well, but my crippling anxiety inside, so like my tests were bad and things like that, and I couldn't really think straight. So I would basically just like not be able to concentrate or like retain information, and that was so frustrating for me. So after I got through college, I did really well. I decided, I'm going to move to San Francisco. I knew that I wanted to be in the mental health field ever since I was in high school. I've changed around a lot with what I wanted to do, but I knew that graduate school was up here. I knew that the research was up here, and I knew that San Francisco had had way more resources than other people. So I moved up here 3 days after. And it was a great change of pace for me. I moved up here with my best friend, but I also was having a really hard time not being in school. That was something that was a structure for me, which is something that I thrive in, is structures. So I ended up starting going back to therapy because I stopped going to therapy. My general practitioner took over my psychiatry duties, and I got up here, I started going to a therapist. I was having, family drama with my dad, and, moving and not being in school and juggling 2 part-time jobs in research. And all of a sudden, my therapist and I have been talking, and I go to another random appointment, and I get my receipt, and it says that I have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. And I was shocked because I was like, is this a typo? And she's like, oh, no. This is in your papers. Like, this is your, records. And I was like, what are you talking about? So I call my mom, and I'm like, Mom, did you never tell me that I have major depressive disorder? And she goes, what are you talking about? You have anxiety. And I go, yeah, I know, but on my paperwork, it says that I have major depressive disorder. And she's like, you've never been diagnosed with that. And I was like, oh my God. So then I start thinking, like, oh my God, my mom never told me this. Like, all my wheels start turning in my head. So then I contact my therapist, and he's like, yeah, like, you told me that you were feeling depressed. And I'm like, I said I might be feeling depressed, but I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed psychologist. I don't know what that means. I came to talk to you about it. We never had a discussion. And I don't think it's fair that this is going to be on, like, basically my permanent record after we never discussed this. And so we went back and forth, and he wouldn't take it off. He's like, you're in remission now. And I was like, well, what does that mean? Remission of what? We never talked about that I had depression. And so I ended up moving, and I ended up breaking up with my therapist because I was like, I'm done. This isn't cool that I got another label put on me when I was never a part of the discussion. So that was really, really frustrating for me, and especially working here at the Mental Health Association, where we pride ourselves in being a part of our recovery process. I just felt so betrayed, and so like, I was just so frustrated. So I came to terms with that, and now I realize that I most likely do have depression. It's pretty comorbid with anxiety. But the way that my old therapist went about it was absolutely not okay, in my opinion. And, being a part of the conversation is something that my new therapist and my new psychiatrist do, which is absolutely amazing, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So now that kind of brings me to the stigmas that I faced while, going through my recovery process, and that I still face every day. So one of them, like I said, I was afraid of dogs, like terrified of dogs. They came up and sniffed me, I would cry. I now have an emotional support animal. I love dogs, but I have an emotional support animal now, and I get a lot of public stigma when it comes to that, because people see me and they're like, oh, you have a full-time job, you're getting your master's degree, you're doing research, you're social, you don't need an emotional support dog. You just got that so you didn't have to, you could have a dog in San Francisco. And I'm like, no, I actually need this animal. So I'm having to justify myself or have people make fun of me because I have an emotional support animal. Even like my close friends and stuff have made comments like, no, you don't need an emotional support animal. And I'm like, okay. So that's a big stigma that I'm currently facing. Like I said, the structural stigmas of, being diagnosed with something that I wasn't aware of, that I even had, no discussion was a part of. That was really difficult as well. I had a huge issue with my landlords when I currently moved. When I told them I had an emotional support animal, they told me I was manipulative and that I, went around all the corners and, I'm just doing this to have a dog and things like that, which was pretty hard. But I think the one type of stigma that I face the most is probably self-stigma. I feel like I'm the hardest on myself, and that's where where I try to cope, and not necessarily a healthy way of just like I want to be perfect. So, I judge myself when I'm having a hard day, or, when I'm feeling super anxious and I can't, meet up with friends and stuff, and I have to cancel plans. I feel a lot of self-stigma comes in at me of like me being lazy and me being, unsocial and a flake and things like that. So that's something that I'm still trying to work on. But now, I've gone through this process basically my whole life of, living with these conditions, and finally getting a name to it in high school was really helpful for me. Knowing my rights, working here at the Mental Health Association of San Francisco. Now I have a full-time job. I, live by myself, which is amazing. I'm getting my master's degree, and I'm aspiring to get my doctorates. I get to do all kinds of legislative change for mental health, which is so empowering. And I'm still doing research on stigma elimination with UC Berkeley. So all in all, I'm doing really well right now, but it's definitely something that I have to work on every day. Remember what they're called. I just actually did a medication switch recently, so I think I'm on Lexapro now. I was previously on Celexa for years. It was really great for me, but as of late it wasn't working too great. I'm not too fond of the medication I'm currently on, so I'm working with my psychiatrist, but I've been on most of the antidepressant medications that are out there.
Yeah.
The only one I don't think I've ever been on is Wellbutrin. I want to say I don't think I've been on that one. But for a majority of them, I've at least dabbled in throughout my process of seeing what chemicals work the best with my chemical imbalance. Really easy process just because a lot of people do abuse emotional support animals, and that's why there is this huge stigma. You can literally get it online. You can go into a place. You can go. Your therapist can also approve it. So what I did is because of all the housing issues here in San Francisco, and most places don't allow you to have animals. I contacted my therapist, but I was in between therapists when I was doing this. So my one therapist that I broke up with was like, I haven't seen you in a long time, so I can't sign off your papers. And then my new therapist is like, I've only had one session with you, and you don't have your dog yet, but this is how you can go through it. So they recommended me to a place in San Francisco, and the woman actually ended up working for my old therapist. So me and her talked, and she signed off my paperwork. I told her, my diagnoses. I let her know how a emotional support animal would benefit me. But now, since my dog knows my therapist and my psychiatrist, they are when my license for him is up, they'll sign off for me.
Okay.
So I don't have to pay additional money, because for this time I had to pay additional money.
Okay.
Yeah. So and one thing that I would really recommend people, like if you're serious actually about getting an emotional support animal for like mental health purposes, is to know your rights, carry your paperwork on you, and make sure that your dog gets like some minimal amount of training, because the difference between service and emotional support animals is that you don't go through the rigorous training of a service animal. So people get frustrated when your dog isn't, being super complacent. Traditional therapy has been a huge process for me. I've been doing it since my cousin passed away. It's been really helpful for me. I actually wanted to be a therapist for a while. I might go back one day, identifying as a peer so people feel more supported. It's been really great for me. I've dabbled mostly in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. I know there's a ton of others, but that's the one that has really worked with me. Yeah.
Awesome. How long, in working through kind of therapists and such, how long did it take you to find someone that kind of worked for you, right? That you meshed with and was helpful?
It honestly just depends, because when I was in high school, I didn't really get a choice. I got my grief counselor that I got actually was through her friend, which was my nurse, and at the neurologist, and she just saw how much I was going through, and she was like, I have a friend who is like a fabulous grief counselor. She can really work through this stuff. And my grief counselor was also a trained hypnotherapist. She never did that with me, but she was really open to trying new things, and so that was that. And then for now, I got really lucky with the therapist that I currently have in San Francisco. I randomly got placed with him through my insurance, but he's absolutely fabulous, and he recommended me his favorite psychiatrist.
Okay.
And so she's the best psychiatrist I've ever had. She really works with me for what works best for me. I'm in on all of my medication changes, and she checks in on me and things like that. I really pride myself in taking self-care, and self-care for me is making sure my dog's getting taken care of, and doing things with him, doing things with my friends, being able to shut off from technology. That's something that I really am trying to work on right now. So kind of just giving myself my me time. I try to work out a lot, and I'll go to yoga classes. That's something that's been really helpful for me, to kind of just shut off and focus on myself. I do a lot of grounding exercises, and I try to be outdoors as much as I can. I live right by the beach, which is my favorite place. I'm from San Diego originally, so I grew up on the beach, so I'm in my happy place when I'm there. So many, but they're kind of just for you to feel your body. So when I was having panic attacks when I was younger, I didn't even realize I was practicing grounding skills when I was going through these, but it's like drinking cold water so you can actually feel the water go down you, or like putting your feet on the actual ground so you can feel them, like, you know, putting your hands on your like neck so you can like feel things. They're just things to remind you that like you are in the present moment. You don't need to be worried about the future moment or the past moment. At first, it didn't. Choice did not play a role. It was kind of just, you know, I didn't really know that I did have a choice. It was kind of just like, I'm trying to get help, and what these people are saying is right. Me having choice now is huge. And I think that just also comes with age and understanding and knowledge, and being empowered by my coworkers that like, if you don't like something, that it's okay that you don't like it, and that you can work with your therapist, or you can find another one. If you don't want to take a certain medication, you shouldn't have to. So now I feel like choice is really big. And like I said, I just really think it came with like understanding and being in this journey of recovery for mental health. That it's really scary, but be open to help. It sounds really stupid. I can't, a grounding exercise, I was like, my therapist literally handed me a piece of paper and he's like, here you go. And I give copies to everybody now. I thought it was so stupid. I was like, this is so dumb. Like, breathing exercises are silly, like, you know, these visuals that they would give me. But really take the help. It really, even though you might not be ready for it, it's still there when you are ready. A fun fact about me is that I love to rollerblade. I feel like everyone at my work knows that. But
Rollerblade or roller skate?
Rollerblade.
Okay.
I definitely have roller skated. I've owned roller skates, but I think rollerblading is my jam. When I used to live on the beach in San Diego, that was like my main source of exercise when I didn't go to the gym. So it was really nice to go around the beach into the bay. It was super fun. So I'd like race other people and stuff. Here it's a little harder because the ground isn't the greatest. Like, I feel like the infrastructure here is just not the greatest, but there's actually roller skating clubs that do it in Golden Gate Park. So I'm planning on joining one of those.